There's three words I want to focus on tonight when thinking about Bill: labor, loyalty, and love. I remember the first time that I met Bill like it was yesterday. It was June of 1987, about 21 years ago. It was between my junior and senior year of high school. I arrived at the old equipment room before it had been remodeled. Many of you have seen that room. And I sat down with him to discuss the possibility of becoming a manager when I graduated from high school. I was all dressed up, had my resume, student body president, senior class president. I found out very quickly Mr. Bill didn't care about any of that. That was not impressive to him. What he wanted to know was my heart, my work ethic, and why I wanted to be a part of the Kentucky basketball program. Bill was a blue-collar guy. Bill was hands-on. I told the Lexington Herald Leader earlier this week about how meticulous he was when packing for road trips. He would not let us do the packing for fear that we would screw up. He did the packing himself, and then we carried the bags out. But to Bill, it was not a job. It was a labor of love. Bill did it because he loved doing it. He smiled, he laughed, and we all learned something from him on a daily basis, whether it was managers, players, and even coaches. The word loyalty has already been used several times tonight. Everyone in this room that knew Bill Keightley knew he was a loyal person. You knew where he stood. You knew where his loyalties lied. And if you didn't know, he'd be happy to share them with you. He demonstrated his loyalty, I think, in several areas. First, with the wonderful head coaches that he worked with. Some of them he thought of as brothers in his early years, and the later coaches he thought of as sons. After my team was fortunate enough in 2006 to win the state championship, I invited Bill to be the guest speaker at our banquet. Those who know Bill won't find this as a surprise, but Bill was the star of the show. Not the awards and the rings and the things that we passed out. He captivated the audience for 45 minutes telling stories. One of the stories he told, he talked about each of the head coaches that he had worked with. He shared a funny story about each one of them, a good memory about each one of them. And at that time, of course, Coach Smith was still here. And when he got to the end of that part of his talk, he said that he's often asked this question: which head coach was the best to work for? He said at first he didn't know how to answer that question, but he said he heard a story about a gentleman who had been married 3 or 4 times. So he learned how to answer the question this way. He said, I guess the one I'm with right now is the best one. Most of my tenure was spent, as I mentioned, with Coach Pitino, and Coach Smith was here as an assistant. So he talked a lot to me about his affection and his deep concern for them. It's already been well documented about his trip to Charlotte last week to see Louisville play. The last time I saw Bill in person was 2 weeks ago on Saturday, right down here in this end zone, on Saturday morning of the state high school basketball tournament. On one side was Coach Gillespie, and I sat and talked with him for about 30 minutes. Coach, he shared with me how close you two had become in just one short year, and how much he was looking forward to the future with you. He was loyal to his friends. There are too many friends to name, and it's really unfair to start. But I had the opportunity to see his interaction with 3 of his closest friends on a daily basis. And then after I left and would come back, still had that opportunity to see them. Van Florence, Bob Wiggins, and Luther Deaton were 3 of his closest friends in life. He stood with them in good times, bad times, poor health. He was loyal, and he demonstrated his loyalty to them and to countless other friends that I am not mentioning tonight. He showed his loyalty to his boys, his managers, as he called us. He always knew what we were up to when we left. He knew what was going on. In my case, he followed my team like my own parents. He would wait on Wednesday mornings after a Tuesday game, Saturday mornings after a Friday game to see the paper and see what we had done. He was one of the first phone calls I received after winning the championship in 2006. And we shared a moment on the telephone that I'll cherish for a lifetime. This year, he was, again, the first to call and congratulate us on making it to the Sweet 16. And he was the first to call the day after we lost. Even though he was in California and the team was getting ready to play Marquette, he called to console me and congratulate me on a great year. The third word is love. And we've already documented tonight what Bill Keightley loved. It's obvious. His family, his friends, the Kentucky Wildcats, the Cincinnati Reds. Like a parent, sometimes Mr. Keightley had to show us some tough love. I recall a trip to a blue-white game in Owensboro, my second year here, Coach Pitino's first year. The players were flying on private planes. The managers, the trainers, the team doctor, we were traveling in two vans. Bill was driving the equipment van. I was driving the other van with the passengers in it. The last thing he said to me when we left the Coliseum was, "We're not in any hurry. Take your time, and we'll get there when we get there." And he gave me a bag of change for the tolls. So, as you can imagine, I'd heard that lecture from my parents many times when I left home as well. I followed him to Bluegrass Parkway, but as soon as we got on Bluegrass Parkway, I merged over into the fast lane, took off. Our van was laughing, chuckling as we passed. I will never forget the look he gave me as he was driving that car and looked over at me. As I said, our van thought it was real funny. We traveled on down the road a little bit more, and one of Kentucky's finest, state trooper, decided to stop us. It wasn't long while we were over in the emergency lane, and I was speaking with the fine trooper. It wasn't long before that second van passed us. I'll never forget that look either, as he leaned up to the steering wheel and gave me a look over. I spent the rest of the way to Owensboro thinking, what is he going to say to me when we get there? Sure enough, he was standing outside his van waiting as I pulled into the Executive Inn parking lot. And he came over to the window and he said, in a very stern voice, "I thought I told you we were not in a hurry." And I felt about that tall. But that's just one example of tough love. But most of the love that Bill gave was love, kindness to all people that he encountered. One more personal note, if I may. As I mentioned, my father passed away in the year 2003. Bill Keightley was a pallbearer at that funeral. My dad worked in General Electric assembly line for 36 years. He was very shy, very introverted. Other than the family, he did not socialize that much. When I became a manager at UK, Bill Keightley merged a friendship with my father and brought him out of a shell that is really amazing. Even after I left here, my dad would bring vegetables that he grew in the garden during the summer on a weekly basis. Him and Bill shared a friendship that was not about Kentucky basketball. It was just about two good old country boys talking about the garden and other things. And for him, being a friend of my father, I will never forget that. One thing that Bill always used to say, Kentucky basketball is bigger than any one person. It's bigger than any coach, no matter how many games they win. It's bigger than any player, no matter how many points they score. Every time Mr. Bill said that, I agreed with him. Tonight, I respectfully am going to have to disagree with Bill after thinking about it. He was and is Kentucky basketball. He has proven over a 48-year career that as great as this program is, it is not bigger than the heart, the soul, the labor, the loyalty, and the love of Bill Keightley, the only man in the illustrious history of this program to be called Mr. Wildcat. Thank you.